Why does a rooster crow when the sun comes up?
A farm rooster is an adult male chicken. Long ago, when chickens had not yet been tamed or domesticated by people and lived in the wild, roosters crowed to call female chickens to mate. This loud crowing caused problems for roosters, though, because it attracted predators as well as female chickens. So to avoid being eaten, roosters began to do most of their crowing when they couldn't be easily seen. Like at dawn or at nightfall, when light was dim. Today's roosters continue the habit, crowing mostly in the early morning or early evening. But it is usually most noticeable at dawn because there aren't a lot of other activities and noises to distract your attention.
Why do people say that they feel like they have butterflies in their stomachs then?
That's just a phrase that describes the fluttery feeling like the beating of delicate butterfly wings that some people get in their stomachs when they're nervous or excited.
Can people in wheelchairs drive cars?
Depending on the severity of the person's disability. Driving a car can be an option for people in wheelchairs. Cars can be modified so that the accelerating and braking are done with hand controls. Other modifications, like ramps or motorized lifts, assist the person in getting in and out of the car.
Why, and how, do animals change color?
Many animals can change their color, some over a period of seconds and others over several months. Cephalopods, a group including octopuses and squids, are especially skillful at changing color rapidly. They can turn different colors in less than a second. Their color changes are usually triggered by a heightened state excitement or fear, which brings on an amazing display of different colors spreading over their bodies. Several kinds of fish and some amphibians and lizards are also able to change colors, though their transformations take a bit more time than those of the cephalopods. Color changes take place in special pigment cells called chromatophores. Changing the size of these cells moves the pigment around, altering the animal's coloration. Such animals change their colors for a number of reasons. Those that can rapidly change colors do so to startle or confuse predators or to better blend in with their environments, a technique known as camouflaging. Camouflaging can either be used by an animal that wants to hide from an attacker, or by an animal that doesn't want to be seen by its prey. Color changes can also be used to attract a mate. Some animals undergo color changes with a change in seasons. Certain mammals and birds that live in cold climates, for example, Have white fur and feathers in the winter so they can blend in with the snow and be less noticeable to their predators. Some songbirds will grow brightly colored, attractive feathers for the mating season. Those feathers are replaced by duller colors after mating is over. These color changes are also caused by pigment cells, located beneath the fur or feathers.
What is the hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth?
The hottest temperature ever recorded on Earth was in the desert settlement of Al-Aziziyat, Libya, located in North Africa. On September 13, 1922. That day the temperature reached 136 degrees Fahrenheit, 58 degrees Celsius.
What is literacy?
Literacy is the skill of being able to read and write fairly well. Unlike speech, reading and writing do not come naturally, they have to be learned. Most people who live in industrialized or developed countries can read and write because everyday activities there depend on it. Developing countries in places like Asia and Africa with very different ways of life from the industrialized nations have low literacy rates because most people there can get along without the skill. Some tribal languages don't even have a written form. Almost 30% of adults in the world, people 15 years or older, cannot read and write, or are illiterate. Even in such wealthy, highly developed nations as the United States, many people don't know how to read and write.
Where do insects go in the winter?
Most insects survive the winter in an inactive state known as diapause. It is a type of hibernation in which all body processes slow down and little energy is required for survival. A few types of insects, like the monarch butterfly of North America, migrate to a warmer place just like many birds to spend the winter, returning in the spring.
Why do I have to be a good sport when I lose a game?
Games or competitions always have winners and losers. When you agree to play a game, you have to prepare yourself for the fact that you may not win. Accepting a loss is hard, because winning a game gives you a wonderful feeling of being the best.
Is there life in outer space?
Despite many reports, over many years, of people seeing alien spacecraft, unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, and of personal encounters with creatures from outer space. There has not yet been any real scientific evidence to indicate that life exists anywhere else in the universe but on planet Earth. The other planets in our solar system cannot support life as we know it. They are too hot or too cold, and they have no water sources. Still, because the universe is so unimaginably vast, the possibility of life existing on a planet elsewhere in the Milky Way or in another galaxy cannot be ruled out for certain. Since 1960, scientists have been involved in a program called SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The scientists who take part in this program look for radio signals emitted in outer space that could indicate the existence of some form of life. Assuming these other life forms would have developed radio technology. Radio waves can travel farther than visible light. So such signals could come from places in the universe too far away to be seen with ordinary telescopes. Radio waves are also not blocked or distorted by our atmosphere. In recent years, scientists have begun looking for pulses of laser light in addition to radio waves.
Does it really matter, for example, if the person who cut in front of you in line gets into the movie theater before you do?
Remember, as much as you wish you could, you can't control how other people act, especially not with yelling and hitting. But what you can control in a given situation are your own feelings and behavior.
What is Earth Day?
During the 1960s, information about problems with the environment, chemicals killing fish in waters, air pollution damaging the atmosphere and endangering the health of all creatures, the widespread destruction of forests and other natural areas began to concern people all over the world. A country's senator named Gaylord Nelson wondered why environmental issues were so disturbing to citizens but didn't seem to be on the government's list of problems to correct.
What is thunder?
Thunder is the sound made by the gases in the air around lightning, which are quickly heated and expand when a strike occurs. Put simply, thunder is the sound of hot air exploding. Loud thunder may seem frightening, but it is totally harmless.
How long ago did dinosaurs live?
Dinosaurs first appeared about 230 million years ago, during the Triassic period. Their large size and vast numbers meant that they dominated animal life on Earth for millions of years. Dinosaurs became extinct around 65 million years ago, at the end of the Cretaceous period. The earliest human beings lived about 2 million years ago. Millions of years after the last dinosaur had died. Earth was much different when dinosaurs roamed the planet. Several 100 million years ago, instead of there being 7 continents or large land masses, there was just one giant mass of land that was surrounded by ocean. This land mass gradually broke apart into separate continents. Areas that are now covered with tall buildings or mountain ranges were once beneath the sea. And scientists believe the climate was fairly warm throughout the year. By the end of the era in which dinosaurs lived, temperatures had cooled and distinct seasons had developed.
Why can't babies do anything?
Try to imagine what it is like to be born. 1 minute you are floating in a warm, dark, quiet world where there is nothing to see, not much to feel. And where you don't even have to eat or breathe on your own, it's all done for you. With nutrition and oxygen reaching you through a special tube called an umbilical cord that connects you to your mother. Then all at once you arrive in an unknown world, as strange as any planet in outer space. Suddenly, air touches your skin and feels warm or cold. Loud sounds, and light, and strange-looking creatures and objects surround you. You have to breathe at once in order to survive. You experience hunger for the first time and will soon have to learn how to eat, too. It takes a long time for a newborn to learn about his or her new world. Human babies are born with instincts and reflexes that help them survive, just like other baby animals. But they have no knowledge or experience about the complex world of people into which they arrive. So don't be impatient with babies, they have everything to learn. Making the learning process twice as hard is the fact that human babies are not fully developed when they are born. In nature, less complex life forms like insects, for instance, can move about and get their own food as soon as they are hatched. But the young of higher forms of life and humans are at the top take many years before they are physically mature. People grow until they are between the ages of 18 and 20 years old, with body changes occurring very quickly in the early years. And because the human brain is so complex, mental growth continues throughout a lifetime. During much of their lives, then, children must be fed, cared for, and taught by adults. So when newborns start out, their bodies aren't even ready for the demands of their new world. They can't see very well at first, especially things that are far away. They don't know how to use their arms and legs much. For a while they can't even grasp things with their hands. The digestive systems of newborns are immature, too, and babies don't have teeth. Unable to eat solid foods, they depend on breast milk or baby formula for all their nutrition. And sometimes they can't even keep that in their stomachs, spitting up a lot. Most frustrating of all for everyone, including the baby, is the fact that babies are unable to talk at first. And the only way they can communicate their feelings or needs is to cry.
Why do people smoke cigarettes?
People smoke cigarettes for the same reasons they do any kind of drug. They like the way it makes them feel. Cigarette tobacco contains nicotine, which is a stimulant that produces an energetic, happy feeling in some people. It can also make people feel relaxed, and for some it decreases appetite. Lots of people start smoking because they want to fit in with a certain group of friends, or because they like the image they present when they light up a cigarette. But while smoking is legal, for those over the age of 18, it has been repeatedly proven to be highly addictive and extremely harmful. In addition to nicotine, cigarettes contain numerous harmful chemicals, like tar and the poisonous gas carbon monoxide. Some minor, but highly unattractive side effects of smoking include bad breath and permanently discolored teeth and fingers. But these problems pale in comparison to the major health risks of smoking. Cigarette smoking is believed to be the cause of 90% of all cases of lung cancer. And lung cancer causes more deaths each year than any other kind of cancer. Smoking causes many other kinds of cancers too, as well as heart disease and numerous other ailments. If women smoke while pregnant, it can cause problems for the health of the fetus. And babies who live in households where people smoke are at an increased risk of dying from sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Hundreds of thousands of people die each year in the United States from smoking-related illnesses, and if those people had never picked up a cigarette in the first place, those illnesses could have been prevented.
Why do I have to wear sunscreen?
If you are going to be out in the sun for a long time, you need to wear a sunscreen or sunblock. These lotions contain chemicals that absorb certain harmful rays of the sun. Ultraviolet rays, keeping them from penetrating your skin. This protection is important because these rays can hurt you, causing painful sunburns that damage the tissues beneath the surface of your skin. Damaging your skin's deep elastic layer makes it look old and wrinkled a lot earlier than it should. But the most important thing to avoid when you're out in the sun is cell damage that causes skin cancer. Doctors have found that being in strong sunlight a lot, especially if you are fair, and having many sunburns, particularly when you are young, can cause real problems many years later. Skin cancers can develop and, when not treated quickly, spread to other parts of the body and be extremely dangerous. Because sunscreens can't protect you from all of the sun's harmful rays, it is also wise to use clothing, hats, and sunglasses to cover up when sunlight is strong. In addition, it is a good idea to limit outdoor activities between the hours of 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. when the rays of the sun are most intense.
So why is it called the bald eagle?
Because one meaning of the word bald that is not commonly used anymore refers to white markings. Due to excessive hunting, environmental pollution, and loss of habitat, the bald eagle population became dangerously low at one point, prompting the U.S. Congress to pass a law protecting it. Bald eagles were once listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an endangered species, meaning they were close to being extinct. Thanks to the laws protecting it, these birds have rebounded a bit. They are now listed as threatened, which means they are not as close to being extinct as they once were. But their numbers are still few, only about 50,000 in the United States, and it is illegal to hunt them.
What is a pimple?
Almost every part of your body is covered with hair, most of it so fine that it is invisible. Hair grows from tiny holes in the skin called follicles, which also contain glands. These sebaceous glands produce oils that make the surface of your skin soft and flexible and keep it from drying out. Sometimes a gland makes too much oil, though, and that extra oil becomes trapped in its follicle. At that point, bacteria which are always present on the skin may infect the blocked follicle. As your body tries to fight the infection, redness, swelling, and pus may appear at the spot, causing what we know as a pimple. Usually squeezing and picking at a pimple only spreads the tiny infection into surrounding tissue, making the problem worse. Pimples that are very infected may take many weeks to heal and leave small scars in the skin. Usually when girls and boys, especially boys, become adolescents, they start to have trouble with pimples. Pimples flare up at this time because certain hormones chemicals made by glands that control different body processes increase as kids approach sexual maturity. Some of those hormones increase the production of oil in the skin. When a person has a lot of pimples, over a long period of time, the condition is called acne. The best thing to do for acne is to keep your skin clean, washing with soap twice a day. If it gets too bad, a dermatologist, or skin doctor, can help. Just try to remember that your acne is normal, it won't last forever. And it is probably more noticeable to you than to anyone else.
How do oysters make pearls?
Pearls are round, iridescent jewels strung together to make necklaces or bracelets, or mounted onto earrings or rings. Unlike most kinds of jewelry that are made from stones or metals, pearls come from living creatures. They are produced by oysters, and, in rare cases, by some other mollusks. The mantle, the part of a mollusk that secretes the substance that becomes the shell, also produces the smooth, shiny nacre, referred to as mother of pearl, found on the shell's inner layers. if an irritating substance like a grain of sand finds its way into the mantle. The mantle will start secreting nacre to cover up that irritant. Layer upon layer of nacre builds up until eventually a pearl is formed. The pearls with the roundest, smoothest shape are the most expensive. Most pearls that we see are a creamy, off-white color, but they can be several different colors. Some oysters in the South Pacific produce black pearls. People can create conditions that encourage oysters to produce pearls. Pearl harvesters make a small cut in the oyster's mantle and insert an irritating substance. Then they sit back and wait for a pearl to form. The pearls that result from this process are called cultivated pearls, while those that occur without human involvement are called natural pearls. It can take 3 years or more for a pearl, whether natural or cultivated, to form.
How is fabric made from plants?
Since ancient times, people have been using the fibers of plants to make cloth. Cotton, which comes from the cotton plant, and linen, made from the flax plant, are the most important of these. The seeds of shrub-like cotton plants are surrounded by long, fluffy white fibers. The seeds and fibers are enclosed in capsules, or bolls. The bolls are picked either by hand or machine. And then the fibers are separated from boll and from the seeds. The fibers are then spun into yarn or thread strong enough to weave into cloth. Weaving is done on looms, which are frames or machines that interlace yarns or threads together. Different types of cotton plants produce fibers with different qualities, with some grown for their sturdiness and some for softness. For centuries, cotton has been grown in many parts of the world, and the cloth and objects made from it have provided valuable trade between countries. But because cotton grows best in mild climates with plenty of rain, the United States is now the biggest producer of cotton. To make linen, the stems of tall flax plants are soaked until they are partially decomposed. Their long fibers are then removed and used to make yarn or thread that is woven into fabric. Until the widespread use of cotton for clothing. Beginning around 1800, people generally wore linen clothes. Linen has been used for so long that examples of it have been found in Egyptian tombs more than 3,500 years old. Although linen is stronger and finer than cotton, it is harder to make because its fibers break easily. Linen is made in many parts of the world, with Ireland being its biggest producer.
Why do women in some countries wear veils?
A veil is a piece of cloth that is usually worn to hide a person's hair or face. Women have worn such veils since ancient times, mostly in Middle Eastern countries, primarily for the purpose of keeping men from looking at them. Many women of the Muslim faith still wear veils of some type when they are out in public. In some Muslim countries, only a woman's eyes are allowed to show. Although Westerners, people from North America and Western Europe, may find these veils symbolic of women's restricted freedoms in many Muslim societies. Muslim women wear them to honor long-held traditions of modesty and to show respect for their religion and the men in their lives.
Why do most cereals make crackling noises when you pour milk on them?
Most cereals are made by baking grain mixtures, made from rice, corn, wheat, or oats, that have been formed into bite-sized pieces. During the baking process, these pieces expand, causing tiny holes or cavities to form on their surfaces. When milk is poured onto cereal, it flows over these holes and traps air inside. As the milk starts to soak into the cereal, it forces the air out and fills up the tiny holes. So, the crackling noise you hear coming from your bowl is actually air being released from your cereal.
How do air traffic controllers know where planes are in the sky?
Air traffic controllers use radar invisible bands of energy called radio waves, which are similar to visible light waves, to detect where airplanes are located in the air. They are the same type of waves as those used in broadcasting but with higher frequencies. Radar waves, which travel in a straight line and at a constant speed, are sent out in all directions through antennae. When radar waves meet distant objects like planes, they are reflected back to receivers. Controllers can tell how far away the objects are located by the speed at which the reflected waves return. Radar receivers process the return signals electronically, using them to visually plot planes on a screen that represents the sky. With radar, controllers can tell how high and fast a plane is flying and in what direction it is heading. While large commercial airplanes have their own radar devices on board to report their altitudes, distance from the ground, and to warn them of obstacles in their paths, smaller aircraft do not. Air traffic controllers keep all planes around an airport at a safe distance from one another, and they direct takeoffs and landings. Controllers can even help a plane land in heavy fog by watching its flight on their radar screen and radioing directions to the pilot. Because radar can detect the position, motion, and even the size and shape of very distant objects, it is used for many other purposes. These purposes include ship navigation, storm detection and weather forecasting, map making, and space exploration.
Why do some people have to wear eyeglasses?
Some people have to wear eyeglasses because their eyeballs are shaped a little differently than normal. Either their eyeballs are a little too long from front to back or a little too short. when light rays enter the dark center of the eye, called the pupil. A lens focuses them onto the back of the eyeball, the retina. Their special nerve cells send signals through the optic nerve to the brain, where these signals combine to make a visual picture. In an eyeball that is too long, images of distant objects are focused in front of the retina, instead of on the retina, and are blurred. People who have this condition are said to be nearsighted, or myopic, which means they can clearly see things that are nearby, but far away things are fuzzy. About 20% of the population has to wear eyeglasses for this condition, which seems to be inherited. In an eyeball that is too short, images of objects are focused behind the retina, blurring things that are close by. A person who has this condition is said to be farsighted. In both cases, eyeglasses are used to correct the problem. The extra lenses of eyeglasses correct what a person's own eyeball lenses can't do, which is to focus light rays directly on the retina, where they belong. Different shaped lenses are used to correct nearsightedness and farsightedness. As people get older, beginning in their 40s, they often find that they need to wear eyeglasses to see close objects well, even if they've never had a problem seeing before. Eyeglasses to correct this condition are frequently referred to as reading glasses because a close activity like reading often becomes impossible without them. The lens of the eyeball can be thickened or narrowed to some degree by eye muscles, though not enough to correct nearer farsightedness, to help it focus on objects. But with age, the lens of the eye hardens, and its ability to change shape to focus on close objects is reduced.
How did we get the United States national anthem?
In September 1814, the United States and Great Britain were in the midst of fighting what is known as the War of 1812. The British had taken over Washington, D.C., and planned to attack Baltimore, Maryland. A few American citizens, including a lawyer and poet named Francis Scott Key, approached the British fleet, which was anchored in Chesapeake Bay, to request the release of an American who had been taken prisoner. The British agreed to let the prisoner and the others return to American shores. But their return had to wait until the British were done attacking Fort McHenry, which was defending Baltimore. Throughout the night of September 13th to 14th, Key heard the explosions of the battle, anxiously awaiting morning to see whether the Americans had won the battle. In the early morning light, Key could see that Fort McHenry's enormous American flag was still waving, indicating that the Americans had been triumphant. Relieved and inspired by the sight, Key composed a poem called Defense of Fort McHenry.
What does it mean when an animal is extinct?
Extinction happens when a species of plant or animal dies out completely. Extinction is a permanent state. Once a species is extinct, it cannot be revived. Scientists believe that extinction usually occurs when a species cannot adapt to major changes to its environment. Some species adapt dramatically to such changes, and in doing so they become an entirely new species. Meaning the species they evolved from becomes extinct. The actions of human beings have caused numerous extinctions. At one time many people believed that Earth's resources, fresh water, trees, fuel sources, animals used for food were unlimited. People have hunted or fished for an animal in such great numbers that the deaths outnumbered births. And the species could not survive. Tearing down forests or filling in swamps to build homes, golf courses, or shopping malls has had a great impact on animal life. Many animals can no longer survive if their habitat is destroyed. Pollution of the air, soil, and water has also been a factor in the destruction of many species. It's important to remember that while human beings have caused the extinction of many species, we also have the ability to protect and save endangered plants and animals. Wildlife preservation laws and organizations like the Sierra Club first arose in the late 1800s. After people began to realize the devastating impact their actions could have on animal species. Widespread hunting of the American bison, for example, reduced the animal's population from 60 million in 1860 to only about 550 just 30 years later. Such a huge and fast reduction in the bison's numbers alarmed many people. In 1966 the U.S. Congress passed the important Endangered Species Protection Act, which meant that animals whose populations were shrinking could be protected from hunters and land developers. That law, and many others passed since then, has generated controversy in situations where the building of a bridge or dam or airport could threaten an endangered species but would help the people living nearby. As the world's population continues to grow, with more and more people living in what used to be animal habitats, such conflicts are likely to increase. Of all the animal and plant species that have ever lived, far more than half are now extinct. On the other hand, new species develop and are discovered all the time. So a balance between death and new life is maintained.
How do people who are deaf communicate?
Deaf people have numerous ways of communicating with each other and with hearing people. Many deaf people use sign language, which is a system of hand signals that correspond to letters, words, and ideas. When deaf people must communicate with hearing people who don't know sign language, sometimes they are accompanied by an interpreter, a hearing person who knows sign language. The interpreter relays the hearing person's speech to the deaf person by sign language, and then reads the deaf person's signs and speaks aloud those words to the hearing person. Some deaf people also become skilled at lip reading, in which they understand other people's speech by watching the way their mouths, faces, and bodies move when they are talking. Deaf people who live on their own rely on special devices in their homes to alert them to danger or the arrival of visitors. Many smoke detectors, telephones, and doorbells can be equipped with light signals. Vibrating devices, or, for those with some hearing, very loud rings or buzzers. Dogs can also be trained to perform such functions. These hearing ear dogs alert their deaf owners whenever the phone rings or the alarm clock goes off. Deaf people can communicate by phone with the help of a telecommunication device for the deaf, TDD. These machines, which must be used at both ends of the conversation, translate spoken words into written words. The people on the phone can then read their conversation rather than hearing it. Enjoying television is also possible, with the help of a closed captioning device. Many television programs are broadcast with captions, the text of every word spoken on the show that run along the bottom of the screen. With a special device attached to the television, these captions become visible for those who can't hear what's being said.
What are invertebrates?
It may seem that most of the world's animals are vertebrates, what's left after mammals. Birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. In fact, invertebrates make up more than 90% of the world's living animals. Any animal that lacks a backbone is an invertebrate. They do not have a bony skeleton, but many do possess a hard, shell-like exterior. Invertebrates include insects, worms, crustaceans, like crabs and lobsters, mollusks, clams and oysters, and arachnids, spiders, scorpions, and ticks.
What does it mean to play possum?
The opossum, whose name is frequently shortened to possum, is a small animal that spends a lot of its time in trees looking for food, insects, fruit, small birds or mammals, and eggs. Its teeth and sharp claws help it get the food it needs. But in a contest with a larger predator, the opossum doesn't have many defenses. It does have one fairly effective trick, however, if an opossum is caught off guard on the ground by a potential enemy. It might pretend to be dead so the predator will leave it alone. Sometimes this works for the possum, and sometimes it doesn't. This behavior gave rise to the expression play possum, which means to pretend to be sleeping or dead to avoid trouble. It can also generally refer to deceptive or dishonest behavior.
How are caves formed?
Caves are hollows in rock, either above or below ground. They are almost always formed when water wears away or dissolves rock. Although disturbances in Earth's crust like earthquakes and volcanoes can also create caves. When ocean waves crash against rocky cliffs, they carve out caves there over time. when an underground stream or rainwater repeatedly flows across the cracks of soft rock. Like limestone or seeps through it, the rock slowly dissolves, and a cave is formed. The world's deepest cave is at Rousseau Jean Bernard, located in France. It is 5,036 feet, 1,535 meters, deep. In Kentucky, at Mammoth Cave National Park, visitors can see the longest cave system. A series of connected caves, in the world. It extends more than 330 miles, 530 kilometers. It would seem that nothing could live or grow in deep caves or long cave systems, so far away from sunlight. But cave explorers have found that this is not true. Caves are home to some strange plants and animals that have adapted to their sunless surroundings. Many have no color or pigment, neither of which would serve a purpose in their pitch-black world. Some animals are sightless for the same reason. Caves are fascinating places because they were the first homes of prehistoric men and women, before they learned to build shelters. Caves often hold clues to what life was like when people were in their earliest stages of development. Fossil remains, ancient tools, and even primitive paintings made by cave dwellers can be found in some caves.
What is the smallest bird?
The smallest living bird is the bee hummingbird, including its beak and tail. This bird measures only about 2 inches, 5.5 centimeters, and weighs about 2/3 of an ounce, 20 grams. The more than 300 species of beautiful, brightly colored hummingbirds live throughout North and South America. They can flap their wings at amazing speeds. The smaller species beat their wings from 60 to 80 times per second, and they are the only birds who can fly upside down. The special structure of their wings also enables them to fly backwards, sideways, and straight up and down. Hummingbirds get their food by hovering over plants and inserting their long, thin beaks into flowers to get the nectar, and insects, inside. Some can hover for close to an hour at a time. Like bees and other nectar-eating creatures, hummingbirds help to spread pollen, the dusty grains that allow fertilization in plants. The pollen clings to their feathers when they come in contact with the male parts of a flower and gets deposited in another plant's female parts, thus helping to produce new plants. Because of their unusually small size, often brilliantly colored feathers, and extraordinary methods of flying, hummingbirds are favorites with birdwatchers.
What causes a fever?
The average temperature of the human body, when measured under the tongue, is around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. You have a fever when your body temperature goes higher than this. Scientists believe that fever is part of the body's defense system against infection. The higher temperature may kill the germs causing it or may speed up the body's defenses, like white blood cell and antibody production, against it. So a fever is a good thing, a sign that your body is working hard to get better. Medicines to reduce fever aren't really necessary unless a person's temperature gets dangerously high above 102 degrees Fahrenheit, 38.8 degrees Celsius. In children and 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius, in adults. At such high temperatures, the human body can no longer cool itself by flushing, releasing heat through surface blood vessels, and sweating. A cold bath or cold wet cloths on the skin can lower a very high fever before it does serious damage to the body.
Can adopted children find their birth parents?
In many adoption cases, the identities of a child's birth parents are kept secret. This practice is meant as a protection for all individuals involved. It allows the natural parents to go on with their lives without having contact, which could be very painful, with the child or children they gave up. The adoptive parent or parents and adopted child can build a new life together and form loving bonds without the interference of a natural parent. But as adopted children grow up, some feel a strong need to get to know their natural parents, particularly their mothers, and to learn the circumstances surrounding their births. In many parts of the United States, an adopted person who is at least 18 years old can find out some information about his or her birth parents, things that wouldn't give away the parents' identities, like medical history, ethnic origin, and religion from hospital and adoption records. An adopted person can also locate his or her birth mother through a reunion agency, but only if the parent has put her name on a list to be contacted. Locating a biological father can be more difficult if the father was not involved in the life of the birth mother when she put her child up for adoption. She may not have given the agency any information about him.
Why do some whales make sounds underwater?
With special instruments, people have been able to record the deep sounds that some whales make as they swim underwater. The mellow sounds are so lovely to listen to that they have been recorded on compact discs and tapes and sold in stores. Some whale sounds resemble barking and can be heard by humans. Whales also make clicking sounds that people can only hear with the help of special equipment. Scientists think that whales use these sounds to help them find their way and keep track of one another. Whales travel in groups, called pods, as they swim in the deep and often dark ocean. This technique is called echolocation. The vocalizations bounce off objects, creating echoes that return to the whale. Whales can see fairly well with their small eyes, but their hearing is extraordinary. Echolocation can tell the whale how big an object is, how far away it is, and in what direction it is traveling.
What is the United Nations?
The United Nations, or UN, is an international organization that works to maintain peace and cooperation among nations. Headquartered in New York City, the UN was formed in 1945, right after World War II. The war was the largest and most costly in human history, involving most of the world and killing tens of millions of people. The countries that founded the organization wanted to make sure that no such war ever happened again. By creating a place where all nations of the world could meet and peaceably solve their problems. Representatives of more than 180 countries join together in regular sessions. Those special sessions can be called to vote on political, economic, and humanitarian matters taking place around the world. A special Security Council is responsible for preserving peace among nations by resolving disagreements between countries or taking actions to stop situations that threaten world peace. In addition to resolving conflicts, the United Nations also oversees other agencies that help provide the world's citizens with healthcare, environmental protection, legal aid, and many other services.
How do the things that I eat and drink keep from going down my windpipe?
When you eat and drink, chewed food and liquids travel toward the back of your throat. Muscles there automatically close the passageway to your nose, so that your food and drink doesn't take a wrong turn. Though some people can force liquid through these muscles, making it spout from their noses. More muscles make the epiglottis, a flap at the top of your windpipe, or trachea, automatically close so that food can't get into your lungs. Your food and drink then have a clear pathway down your esophagus, a muscular tube that runs from your throat to your stomach. Sometimes, a trickle of liquid, from a drink, or from saliva in your mouth, passes into your windpipe before the epiglottis can close it. When that happens, you feel like you're choking, and you cough and cough to expel the fluid from your lungs. It is said that what you swallowed went down the wrong pipe, and that's exactly what happened. Some liquid went down your windpipe instead of your food pipe. When food gets stuck in the trachea, though, more serious choking can occur. That food can partially or fully block the windpipe, leading to breathing problems. If the windpipe is partially blocked, a person may still be able to take in enough air to cough out, which will usually remove the piece of food. Remember, as scary and violent as coughing is, it is a good sign during choking, indicating the trachea is not completely blocked. When a person cannot cough, though, and holds his or her neck, that individual needs help. The Heimlich maneuver, named after the doctor who invented it, is a method of dislodging a piece of food from a choker's throat by reaching your arms around the person's body from behind and squeezing your fists up into his or her abdomen. The practice has saved many lives.
Where does the moon go during the day?
Because Earth makes a complete spin on its axis each day. The spot that we occupy on Earth is generally turned away from the moon and its reflected sunlight during the daytime. When we have daytime, the other side of the world is experiencing night, and the moon is visible to them. But at certain times of the month, when weather conditions are just right, the moon can be seen when the sun is still shining if you look hard enough in the bright sky.
Why is genital hair curly even on people who have straight hair on their heads?
As with the hair on our heads, genital, or pubic, hair is curly and kinky because of the shape of the follicles. And that hair is thick and coarse because of the larger size of the follicles. When we go through puberty, many of the changes in our bodies result from the presence of certain hormones, which are chemicals that control body processes. We have hair follicles all over our bodies. And the hormone androgen affects follicles in several places: the genital area, underarms, and facial hair, changing those follicles during puberty to produce a thick, curly kind of hair. Men have much more androgen than women, which explains why women don't usually have coarse facial hair like men do.
If Earth is moving all the time, why don't we feel it?
Even though Earth rotates at a startling speed, 1036 miles 1668 kilometers per hour at the equator, and orbits the Sun even faster, at 67,000 miles 107,000 kilometers per hour. We don't feel it because the rate of motion is a constant one, never slowing down or speeding up. We can only really feel motion when the speed changes. If you were in a moving car and couldn't see the scenery passing by, couldn't hear the wind blowing, and couldn't feel the car vibrating, you wouldn't be able to tell how fast you were going, or even if you were moving at all. Objects don't fly all over the place when Earth moves because gravity keeps everything firmly in place as the planet orbits and turns.
Why are there deserts?
A desert is a land area that receives less than 10 inches of precipitation, rain or snow, a year. As strange as it seems, that definition makes parts of Earth's polar regions, the Arctic and Antarctica, desert-like in their climates. The fierce cold there causes dry air, which allows for little precipitation. Most of Earth's deserts, however, are dry, rocky, and sandy. And because the greatest of them border the tropics. North Africa's Sahara is the biggest, many of them are hot. Wind patterns are most responsible for the creation of deserts. Most of the world's deserts are located in areas that get a lot of warm, dry wind. That dry air blows through desert regions, robbing them of moisture and reducing the likelihood of cloud formation and rainfall. High temperatures, which cause evaporation, and surrounding mountains which can stop moist air from approaching can also help create a desert climate.
How does a lie detector work?
Lie detectors, or polygraphs, have been featured in countless police dramas on television and in the movies. And they are usually portrayed as foolproof methods of determining whether a person accused of a crime is lying or telling the truth. A person taking a polygraph is hooked up to several sensors that measure things like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, and perspiration, or sweat. The results measured by the sensors are recorded as jagged lines on a piece of paper that moves through the polygraph machine. The tester begins by asking the subject questions he or she knows the answers to, like the subject's name, the day of the week, or the color of an article of clothing. From the answers to these questions, the tester can see what the subject's normal heart and breathing rates look like. Then the tester begins to ask the serious questions about the crime that was committed, for example. The idea is that if a person is lying, his or her heart will beat faster and he or she will sweat more. And these changes will be recorded as higher peaks in the jagged lines. Many people believe that an experienced reader of polygraph tests can accurately tell if the person being tested has lied. Others insist that such tests are highly inaccurate and easy to beat for those who know how.
Why are barns usually painted red?
Paint coats wood, protecting it from sunlight and rain damage and making it last longer. When early farmers had enough money to paint their barns, they usually used inexpensive paint because the structures were so large. Ferrous oxide, a chemical powder that gives paint its red color, was readily available and cost little. Thrifty farmers in New England, New York, and the upper Midwest region painted their barns red. In those places, red barns remain a tradition. But there are plenty of barns in other parts of the country that are not red. Early farmers that were poor, especially in regions like Appalachia and the South, left their barns unpainted because they did not have the money to do the job. Unpainted wood usually weathers to a soft gray color. And in places like Pennsylvania, Maryland, and some southern Midwestern states, The most frequently seen barn color is white. Some people think that white barns grew popular when dairy farming became more important after the Civil War. White suggests cleanliness and purity, desirable qualities to be associated with milk production. Special farms where fancy horses or prize livestock were raised sometimes had barns painted unusual colors, like yellow, green, or black.
Do all plants have roots?
The simplest types of plants don't have roots. Single-celled green algae, for instance, float on water surfaces, as do many types of seaweed, which are larger types of algae. Those seaweeds that do cling to the seabed do so through growths called steadfasts, which are not true roots. Seaweed absorbs water and minerals from the sea through all its parts. Similarly, simple plants like mosses form low-growing mats in damp places, soaking up the moisture they need directly from their environment. Instead of roots, they have thread-like growths called rhizoids that anchor them to rocks or trees. More complex forms of plants, though, like ferns, conifers, cone-bearing plants, and flowering plants, all have true roots and stems, an internal transportation system that can move water and minerals from their source to wherever they are needed. Land plants have two types of roots, tap roots and fibrous roots. A plant's root type is often determined by its water source. A tap root is a large, single root that grows straight down to reach water deep in the soil, with smaller roots branching off of it. Fibrous roots have no main root but spread out in a wide web to gather water located in the top layers of soil. In places like rainforests where there is abundant plant growth with little ground space for roots and plenty of moisture, some plants grow high up in trees. These epiphytes, or air plants, have fibrous, spongy, aerial roots that get moisture from the frequent rains and take minerals from the surface of the tree on which they grow, or from the plant debris that gathers around their roots. Many orchids are epiphytic plants.
Why does our house make funny sounds at night?
All matter, gases, liquids, and solids expands when heated and shrinks when cooled. This principle explains some of the funny and unexpected sounds that your house makes at night. During the day, the sun's rays warm the materials your house is made of, like the wooden frame that supports its roof and walls, and they expand. Heat from the sun may also make the interior of your house warmer and even shine on some of its furniture. When night comes, the temperature outside can drop 30 degrees or more as Earth turns away from the sun. Things like house building materials and furniture become cooler, too, shrinking and slipping a little, which can sometimes cause creaking and groaning sounds. The noises are particularly noticeable at night because your home and neighborhood are so much quieter than they are during the day. Some of the funny noises you hear at night may also be sounds that are going on all the time, like the motor that runs your refrigerator or a dripping faucet that you just don't notice when you are busy and a lot of things are going on around you. But in the stillness of the night, when you are trying to fall asleep, you can suddenly hear them all, loud and clear.